It makes me nuts hearing everyone criticize King Trump and his rabidly bigoted basket of deplorables as being unchristian. It makes my blood boil to hear intelligent people, many of whom actually have read the Gospels, talking about Jesus like he's some kind of moral visionary, a paragon of virtue, champion of the poor, epitome of compassion. I have yet to figure out where that character comes from. He's not in the Gospels. The guy in the Gospels is basically the opposite of this fluffy, hippie, liberal Jesus everyone seems to imagine. Let's look together at just one example of what I'm talking about among countless examples, the passage in the Gospel of Matthew known by many as the parable of the workers in the vineyard. I'll summarize it briefly. You can read the full passage in the video description. Jesus tells the story of a very wealthy man with a winery that is thriving so well that he finds himself scouring the marketplace 5 times in one day to find enough day laborers to work his vineyard. He is so ridiculously profitable that he's willing to hire workers very late in the day, even when there's only an hour of daylight left, and willing to pay even these a full day's wages. This guy is loaded. This is a common theme for Jesus. Preposterously rich people who represent God, whose actions are to be taken by the audience as righteous without question. The rich man promises the first batch of workers that he'll pay them a specific amount. He tells the rest that he'll pay them, quote, whatever is right. Now, on earth, we have this thing we call good faith. Unfortunately, Jesus either isn't aware of the concept, or he feels that the rich man, being rich after all, doesn't have to act in good faith. And indeed, he doesn't. He pays everyone the same. The people who worked only 1 hour get exactly the same amount as the people who worked all day. That's bullshit. I'm not talking about his decision about what to pay them. I'm talking about the gap between the agreement and his behavior. Telling people you'll pay them whatever is right sets up an expectation in their minds, and acting in good faith means either meeting that expectation or clearly addressing it ahead of time so they can make an informed choice. By acting in bad faith, he takes away their agency. As I've often said, disinformation is disenfranchisement, and the rich man knows it, and let's not forget, he represents God. This is not Jesus giving a warning to the rich, but rather giving the rich permission to dupe the poor for their own ends. But that's not enough for Jesus. The rich man knows that it's going to upset the people who worked all day. In fact, he contrives with his paymaster to make sure that the latecomers get paid first, so the folks who worked all day get a good long look, so they can clearly see that the latecomers are getting the same pay. He deliberately rubs their noses in it. What the fuck? That's not just cruel, it's weird. Why would anyone do such a thing to human beings who have a genetic sense of fairness that is guaranteed to cause them to suffer? It gets worse. Jesus doesn't even notice their suffering, but instead misrepresents them as envious, turning their perfectly normal suffering into a vice. He represents the rich man as claiming to be generous, that is, lying, because rubbing their noses in the fact that they were duped is not generous at all. It's sociopathically cruel. This is another theme for Jesus, utterly missing the real point of the horrible stories he tells. But what point is he trying to make? Christians, correct me. I think he's trying to make the point that God decides according to his own mysterious judgment how to reward his followers, and they have no claim to deserve anything, because anything we do is not only entirely lacking in value to God, but in fact filthy rags in his eyes. Which, wow, thanks God. My donations to charity, the many selfless acts I've done over the years just because it felt like the right thing to do, with no expectation of reward or even thanks ever. My efforts toward making the world a better place despite the constant dump of hopelessness, that's all filthy rags? God's love is just so cozy and comforting. As I said at the beginning, this is by far not the only example of Jesus declaring the rich exempt from basic human decency, expressly because they're rich. If you really think that the MAGA crowd are anti-Christian, I strongly suggest that you take a closer look at Jesus and compare what he says and does, not to mention what he never says and never does, to what you know in your heart to be good and moral. And don't even pull that love thy neighbor garbage on me. Love thy neighbor is not only a needle in the proverbial haystack, it also turns out to be deeply racist. Here's a video to explain it. That's all I had to say. Thanks for watching.